All right. So next thing that we also need to talk about is that what will we do when we face an error as we are writing a code? What type of errors do we see in Python and in Visual Studio Code? Let's talk about that. I already have this file. I opened a new file. I just filled it out. I called the file mistakes we make.py. I will post this file on Canvas so you can have access to it. I'm not gonna. I decided to just not type everything as I'm speaking, just to save some time. So let's just go over this file. So, all right. The first thing that we need to know is what happens when we write some code and then we run our code. Okay, this is the first thing that we want to know, what is happening behind the scenes. So when you run your program, Python has an interpreter. Like I said in my previous video, when you write a Python code, this is a high-level language. High-level language is a language that is close to human language, okay? So your machine does not understand a single character of that thing, okay? Your machine language is what we call binary code, which is a combination of 0 and 1s. Behind the scene, like your CPU, your hardware, is just working with signals, like electrical signals, right? When it's on, it's 1. When it's off, it's 0. So your machine only understands 0 and 1s. So somehow we need to translate this high-level language, this Python code, into 0 and 1. So that's where Python interpreter comes around, and its job is to interpret the code line by line into a language that is close to machine language, either the 0 and 1s directly, or binary or byte codes, which is something in between. But I'll get to that. I don't want to go into too much details, but when you run your code, the Python interpreter or Python compiler, they're both kind of the same. It's a little different, but for now we can just say they're the same. So they're responsible for make sure there is no syntax error. So it's gonna check everything, make sure there is no typo, everything is typed as it was supposed to be. Okay, so it's gonna check the whole thing. If it can find any typos or mistakes or syntax error, it will let you know. So for example, we saw an error in the previous video. At the end of the video, that error was printed by the compiler as we were translating and compiling the code, okay, before even we get to run the code, right? Because it was checking all the errors and the syntax errors, make sure everything that we are doing follows the rules and everything. And we were actually combining an integer with a string, and because that's against the rules, so it just gave us that error. So this type of errors that are happening as we compile the code before even running it, we call them compile errors, okay? So that's going to be the first type of error that you will see. If you do something against the rules, if you have any typos or anything, you will get this compile error as soon as you run your code, as soon as you just click on this. This is where the Python compiler or interpreter comes along and then checks everything. Then if it cannot find any syntax errors, so that the Python interpreter actually runs every code line by line. So it reads the line, interpret that line into machine codes, and then it runs it, okay, line by line, based on where it should run. So if you have a main, it's just going to read the first line of the main block and then translate it and run it. That's how it works. As it runs the code, if we face any issues, which we will. We call those runtime errors. I will get to that. So first thing was compilers. Prevent you from compiling the program. These are the syntax errors, typo errors, and things that we did against the rules. So it happens as we are compiling the code. But if everything goes as planned and there is no compiler, we run the code and then somewhere we do something and then your program crashes again. Okay, so or your program stops or crashes again. So this is what we call runtime error. It is also explained here. So the runtime errors happens as you're running. Again, they're different. You're not compiling. We are done with compiling and now we're running the actual code line by line. So now the runtime error happens. I'll show you some examples how it could happen. And now your program is stopped and crashed. So now this is the second type of error that we might face, runtime error. We also call them exceptions. This exception thing, we will learn about them in the future. There are ways you can control them. Like you're running your code and something happens, you can let your program to crash, which is not professional. Imagine you're playing a game and boom, your program crashes, right? You don't want that happening. So we can actually control these exceptions. So when something happens as you're running your code, we can kind of control those. So we will learn about this exception in the future again. So it's a very important topic. So keep that in mind. Exceptions are errors that are happening as we are running the code. Compilers, it's just they're happening as we are checking and compiling the code before even running the code. And we also have the logic errors. So logic errors are errors that happen by programmers. So for example, I wanted to add 10 by 20, but instead of that, I added like 10 by 30. So I made a stupid mistake. So that's a logic error. And then I run my code and I see, okay, why am I getting like, I don't know, whatever, 50 instead of getting 60? Because I made a mistake. I added up like the wrong numbers. So we also have this type of errors that are happening by programmers. We also call them logic errors. So for example, I have this code. I have this main function. So what's going to happen? So let me just run this for now. I'm just going to run this. It is running and it is printing things. But what's going to happen if I just miss this? Save, compile, run. What just happened? So this is going to be the compiler, okay? Because it was checking the code, it was compiling the code, and boom, this happened. So it tells me in line 20, the main is there is a syntax error, okay? There's a syntax error. So there's a typo somewhere here. So this is a compiler. So what's going to happen if I forget the colon thing? There we go. So it says it's expected colon, line 20. So boom. So these are the compile errors. Okay, here's the thing. Is there any way I can teach you all type of compile errors? There are so many. Okay, there are so many compile errors that you might face there, and there's no way for me to explain and teach you all of those. So you get familiar with these errors as you start writing your programs, and you will see them. You ask me or your TA, or you look it up online. You ask like ChatGPT for it. So you get familiar with them with just seeing more. That's the only way, okay? Some of them are important. I will talk about them in the class. So make sure you're avoiding those, or you know how to fix it when you see it. But some of them you will get familiar with them as you write more codes and everything, okay? So all right, so okay, now what's going to happen if I just want to print this here instead of adding this? So if I just do this, it's going to get run, no issues, and as you can see, it's running it. But what's going to happen if I miss the indentation, if I miss the tab part? So there we go. Now it says missing a tab to indicate it belongs to the main function. So it's kind of smart. Sometimes it gives you like some error messages that don't make sense, but most cases it explains at least what the problem is, and it also shows you the line. So when sometimes it shows you the line, either the error happened on exact same line or somewhere before that. Just keep that in mind. Okay, so that's kind of another type of error that you might face. Or what's going to happen if you just tab in more than what you were supposed to. So if I just do that, there we go, same thing. Does not match any other indentation lever. Okay, this is on indent. So there we go, another issue we just faced. Okay. Now I want to show you a little runtime error. Okay, so now let's assume everything is fine and you're just running the code as something happens as you're running the code. So let's say we assign, well, this is what we call a variable. You will learn it next week, but I'm just adding them so you can see. So so x is 15, y is 30. We just divide them, so it's going, the result is supposed to be 5, right? Did I fix this? Nope. All right, so we divide 15 by 3 here because x is 15, y is 3, and the result should be 5.0, right? There we go. But what's going to happen if I just change the value of the y to 0? So now I am dividing 15 by 0. So when I run it, as you can see, this error happened as I was running the code. How do you know that? Because it already print my message, print my first message, right? Did I make a mistake? We got to this line, that means we were running it, and then we got to this line and it says division by 0. So this is what we call a runtime error. It happened as we were running the code. So in most programming languages, you cannot divide something by 0. If you do that, your program crashes, which you just witnessed. And compiler does not check this type of stuff. That's why it happened as we were running the code. So that's another example I wanted to show you. There is also another type of error that you might face. I called it logic error because I was supposed to do something, I made a stupid mistake, and then I did something else. So for example, here, what if instead of I just use division, I just use 2 of these just by mistake, right? So let's just do this, run it. So now the result is 7.5, and then I just stupidly made a mistake and I just used 2 of these, and I'm running my code and I'm looking at the result and say, whoa, why is it not 7.5 anymore? Why is it not working? So as you can see, everything is running. There is no compiler, there is no runtime error, but I'm not getting the expected result. Why? Because my code had a logic error. I, as a programmer, made a mistake here. So that's also another example of the type of error that we might face in programming.